I'm Riley Chow. I'm here with Luca Giliberti, Tony Ruiz, and Kevin Jacobsen. Kevin, where to begin with these Oscar nominations that we have just found out about?
Joker. Joker leads all nominations with 11, and I sort of can't believe I'm saying that when we have films like 1917 and The Irishman and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I think all could have conceivably been nomination leaders, but yeah, here we have Joker, and it's something we I think, have to take seriously in terms of some of the other crafts, not just Joaquin Phoenix and score, but some of these other ones. And just, it's interesting seeing all of the nominations for all of those 4 films I mentioned, all of them getting at least 10 nominations. And I sort of think that that comes from a shorter voting window overall, that people weren't really getting to some of the smaller films, and there's just an overabundance of 1917 and Hollywood and Irishman and Joker in all of these categories.
Yeah, we really have 2 groups of Best Picture nominees. You know, we've got the ones with 10 or 11 nominations, and we've got the ones with 6. And what does Ford v. Ferrari have, 3 or 4? But I really thought that maybe this year could be the one where we'd finally get 5 Best Picture nominees, since it seemed so clear what the top 5 are, and even maybe what the top 6 are if you include Jojo Rabbit. Tony, what do you make of the nominations and the announcement?
My first reaction was yawn. It's just not a very exciting group. I think Joker certainly overperformed, and yet there still seems to be this. I think Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is still in a really good position, although it lost out on editing, which I find a little strange. Parasite, I think, underperformed. I think it took a hit by knocking Song Kang-ho into supporting actor, because that was his best shot. I think it was the film's best shot to get an acting nomination, and films that have a good shot at winning Best Picture usually have an acting nomination. I mean, the last time a film won Best Picture, I looked back and I can only think of 4 in recent memory: Slumdog Millionaire, Lord of the Rings, Braveheart, and Last Emperor, that didn't have any acting nominations. So that could propose a problem for Parasite. But there were also some things I love. I love that Jonathan Pryce got in for Best Actor, because I interviewed him, so I'm going to take all the credit. And there was just a lot of head scratchers. And so I'm still trying to process some of these things, and we can talk about some snubs and other things later.
They were kind of a different kind of head scratcher, though. Like, Gold Derby actually did very well. I feel like there were not too many crazy surprises. The odds got 77%. Tony, you said that you think that Parasite still has a path to win. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, other than the acting miss, it still got in a lot of what we probably thought it would get. It got picture, it got director, it got screenplay, it got editing, it even got production design, which made me really happy. But in this era of the preferential ballot, I still think it's beloved enough and doesn't have some of the backlash that films like Joker, of course, now I'm even questioning if there's a Joker backlash, because clearly the Academy of it. But I still think it could be the passion. It could be a passion pick with everybody. With 1917's, certainly a technical masterpiece, but it also didn't get any acting nominations. So, could we be looking at Once Upon a Time in Hollywood versus Joker? I don't know, but I still think that Parasite has some. I'm not ready to write it off yet. I think PGA and DGA will tell us something.
Luca, I heard you saying, "Oh wow." What's that about?
Well, just a few months ago when Joker came out, I never would have believed that it would be the nominations leader on Oscar morning. And it's still hard to believe that it got 11 nominations. And that's coming from someone who didn't really completely dislike the movie. I did, like the movie and think a lot of those those nominations in the below the line categories were very much deserved. But something like costumes, and there are just several categories where I don't think it needed to get in. To me, it's just very surprising what happened with these nominations. And one thing I need to mention is the fact that there's one person of color in those 20 acting slots, which is ridiculous. There was no need for there to only be one person of color nominated. We had so many deserving performers this year of color, like Jennifer Lopez and Awkwafina and Lupita Nyong'o and so many more, Song Kang-ho. It just disappointed me to see those acting lineups. And after BAFTA, those nominations, which were even worse, I thought maybe the Oscars will give us something different, or a tiny bit different at least, but they just gave us the same thing practically. And I'm very disappointed by it.
Yeah, the one that really hurt me was Song Kang-ho for Parasite. He had been, he had won the Los Angeles Film Critics. He had been nominated even by the Australian Academy, which tends to line up with the Oscars, although not really this year. They were a lot kinder to Asians. The Farewell, it's a movie that made back 6 times its budget, has like a 90 on Metacritic or something. And Awkwafina just won the Golden Globe, and yeah, she's not in here. Instead, we've got the 2 popes. That did very well. I think one thing that I loved about this morning, though, were the presenters. John Cho and especially Issa Rae, I thought, were perfect. They didn't complain about how early it was, and they had pleasant banter. And I love that they pronounced all of the names correctly. Even Martin Scorsese. Not saying Scorsese, just as everyone always does. How did you guys feel about that pairing?
I like the pairing. The one thing that just, I don't understand this need to have a clapping audience when, by the way, they were sitting facing where an audience would be. Their backs were to where an audience would be. So who was clapping? Was it just somebody pressing a clap button? That just seemed weird to me. But other than that, you know how much absolute sucker I am for people pronouncing things correctly. So I love that they actually pronounced everything correctly. I mean, people need to take note. Learn pronunciations.
Yeah, I will also just add, I thought they were great. I thought they were one of the best, maybe of the decade. But I still sort of miss the pictures of the acting nominees. That's always kind of a nice touch, and I sort of like the traditional way they sort of used to do things, but I would say that this could have been a lot worse than it ended up being. And I also loved Issa Rae's little comment in the director presentation that she made. I don't know if people really caught it, but she mentioned that, congrats to those men. So that was kind of a nice little shot, I would say.
Yeah, it was perfect. She was subtle, but she didn't also, delay things by harping on about things, or even for Hair Love, which she is actually starring in as voice actor. I thought she actually could have been even a bit more excited, but that was fine. So, Kevin, if you enjoyed that, what parts of this morning did you have a problem with?
Well, certainly going back to what Luca was saying.
You're lying, people.
Some of the acting nominees, I think there was a lot of missed opportunities for some great undervalued performances that just didn't make it. Very sad for Lupita Nyong'o to just, I feel like the SAG nomination definitely gave us hope, and all the critics' love certainly suggested there was passion. But I think once again, we have to just go back to the fact that 92 years later, we still have a major horror bias in the Academy. And it's a major problem, and it needs to be addressed along with many other things. But Jennifer Lopez, the fact that she didn't get nominated also felt to me like a bit of, we don't want you in the club. And it reminds me of sometimes when people predicted Mickey Rourke or Sylvester Stallone to win Oscars, but then they didn't because they had made bad movies, and this was maybe considered to be a fluke time that they were rarely really good in a movie or something like that. And that's really what this felt like to me, because there's no excuse for her to miss here, in my opinion.
Yeah, another thing with those kind of snubs is that I feel like every year we kind of learn anew that don't underestimate, the films that are doing very well overall. The films that are at the top of the Best Picture list will just continue to do well. So I had tried to predict The Irishman, in categories like costumes, which it got unexpectedly, but then I also predicted it in, lead actor. But overall, I think that still rings true, though. Like in the sound category, how they finally pushed out Star Wars because they had both Joker and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, or 1917 getting in kind of surprisingly to makeup and visual effects. So it's hard to be a movie that's not in contention for a Best Picture win, it seems.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Like at the Emmys.
Go on, Luca.
Well, yeah, it was just reminding me that it's like at the Emmys, where if you're not in a series nominee, you can barely get nominated, let alone win. And I agree with Kevin. I think it's very disappointing that we're still, we're in 2020 now, and we still can't get a horror movie nominated in several categories. I mean, my biggest problem with these nominations were that the choices were just so uninspired and so safe. We could have had a Michael Abels in score instead of Star Wars, for instance. We could have had Lupita Nyong'o in Best Actress. We could have had The Farewell get into picture, supporting actress, and screenplay. At the very least, screenplay. I don't know why Lulu Wang is going home without an Oscar nomination now. It makes no sense to me. I just feel like we're seeing the same movies across the board, and while some of those movies are really great, and I understand why they got all these nominations, I'm not seeing enough variety here. I mean, just because you're a Best Picture contender doesn't mean you need to be nominated in costume and production design, in cinematography, in editing. I was actually quite satisfied to see Once Upon a Time in Hollywood not nominated in editing, because I thought it was one of the weakest aspects of that movie. And it was nice to see a Best Picture contender, perhaps our Best Picture winner, not breaking into this category, because it would have probably just been a nomination because it's a top 3 Best Picture contender. And those are the nominations I really like least. And every year I say I hope next year we see more variety and we see non-Best Picture contenders nominated in, like, for example, that cinematography category. But I feel like it's just wishful thinking at this point. Last year was really great. We had some very inspired choices, I felt, even if the winners ended up being, not everyone's favorites. But the excitement's just gone this year. As Tony said at the beginning, it's a big yawn almost.
I think where we saw some more inspired nominations, or maybe not even inspired, but more clear signals that they were voting on the specific category, was in all of the categories where you have to opt in to vote. The documentary and animated and all the short categories, foreign language, those ones, it seemed like they weren't necessarily choosing, what are considered the critical consensus for like best movie of the year or anything, but it seemed very much like they had taken the time to actually watch the films that were in consideration and then vote based on them. I thought that the movies that were nominated lined up with the Academy's taste over the years, as opposed to what was being most heavily campaigned. So that was refreshing. For example, not seeing Frozen nominated in animated film. What about in Best Editing, though? With Once Upon a Time in Hollywood snubbed, does that kill its Best Picture chances? Because we do always see that category line up with the Best Picture winner. The Best Picture winner has to at least be nominated, with the exception of Birdman, because that movie kind of had no edits, or at least very little editing. So I think we all give a pass to 1917. But for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, does it still have a chance, Tony?
Does it have a chance? Yes. Mainly because if there's one thing you can say about Hollywood, it's definitely going to reward a film about Hollywood. I mean, I think it's pretty safe that Brad Pitt's probably going to win supporting actor. Tarantino's in a good place to win screenplay. I think he's got some competition there, but right now he seems to be winning that a lot. Never underestimate Hollywood's ability to, kiss its own ass. So I think that could definitely not. But are we really going to be talking about Joker as the three films? Hold on, I'm pulling up my. I mean, Ford versus Ferrari got an editing nomination, but no acting nominations. Irishman, editing, acting across the board. Jojo Rabbit got acting nominations. Joker, acting nominations. Parasite, no acting nominations. So I think I don't think these nominations really help us. I think it just kind of muddies.
I agree.
I will just add that I think when we see Parasite here in film editing and we don't see Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, it could be one of those signs that people looked back on when they see maybe that a Parasite actually did win Best Picture, and we're like, the signs were there from the start. And the same thing happened kind of last year with Green Book randomly getting a film editing nomination and Roma did not. And so these are these little signs that you have to look out for. And just to go to screenplay, speaking of other contenders, the fact that 1917 is nominated for original screenplay kind of makes no sense to me. I mean, I love the movie. I think it's a brilliant technical achievement. I just don't understand where the screenplay nomination comes from. And so I think it's also one of those things you have to look at as a sign that there is major support for 1917 still. And I think, even if people think maybe it's Bong Joon-ho could take director because he's sort of charming people and he has these great speeches and Parasite is this force, I think you definitely have to watch out for Sam Mendes and the film still.
Yeah, I agree, and especially after we saw the box office numbers, because the movie is just now gaining momentum, which is very important leading up to the Oscars, because there's very little time left until the actual Oscar voting. So I agree with Kevin. I think 1917 is a huge threat, and I think Sam Mendes is probably going to win Best Director. I feel like Bong Joon-ho needed that boost, or would have needed that boost from the Globes. I don't think he's probably still in second position for me, but at the moment I just don't see him winning. And he even tied at Critics' Choice with Sam Mendes, even though the Critics' Choice Association doesn't necessarily matter. But this Best Picture race is still incredibly wide open, and I think we do need to see DGA and PGA, and even though SAG has become less important throughout the years, if Parasite wins at SAG, that's a big sign, or that's a big something working in its favor significantly. So I'm very curious to see those. But I agree, those nominations haven't really told us anything about this race, because Once Upon a Time with that editing snub, I don't know if I feel comfortable putting it at number one. I probably still will, because I feel like it's a movie that everyone seems to love. So I could still see that. What? But a lot of people, believe me, I didn't like it myself, but I know so many people who love that movie. There's so much respect for the movie, which is also important. It's just a very confusing race. Normally, I would say Joker has a chance, but I just don't see Joker winning Best Picture, even with 11 nominations. That's just not going to happen.
Yeah, 1917 seems to be not really divisive at all. I'm not sure that everyone loves it as much as certain people. Like, it only has a 79 on Metacritic, but it doesn't seem to be upsetting anybody, like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood or Joker or even The Irishman. I still wonder about Parasite, especially after the Emmys and this whole season, when we've just seen Fleabag coming in, from another continent and kind of going from 0 to 100. Parasite similarly seems to have a lot of passion, but I'm not sure if it's maybe as crowd pleasing as 1917. It seems.
But the thing I think the thing we have to remember, though, is that last year, what did we end up hearing last year? Green Book was supposedly divisive. Green Book was supposedly the film that was going to have a lot of ends up winning Best Picture. So we have to be very careful and not just assume that just because we might think a film is divisive doesn't mean that it's going to be reflected that much in the Academy. I think there's one thing that these nominations showed today, that it's that, maybe bringing all this, younger membership into the Academy doesn't necessarily translate to better nominees.
Yeah.
So.
And one movie I did still want to mention on the positive side is Little Women, which did get 6 nominations, which is great. I'm very happy for Florence Pugh for getting her first nomination, Saoirse Ronan getting her 4th nomination, and that's incredible. That's an incredible feat for her, considering she's just 25 or not even 25 yet. And I'm just very happy for that movie. Would I have liked Greta Gerwig to get into Best Director? A lot, yes, and I'm still very disappointed that it's an all-male lineup. But I'll take these 6 nominations. But we need to see more women in that category in the years to come. And it's not true that women didn't make movies that were not deserving of getting nominated. I hear that argument tossed around here and there, and I don't disagree with it. I think they absolutely directed movies that were incredible. Lulu Wang, Greta Gerwig, and so many others. So we need to see change in the years to come.
I think Greta Gerwig was kind of the only one in contention, though, where you have kind of 10 guys in contention. I think the issue is still a lot more about opportunity.
Yeah.
In the first place. I like what Tony's saying, though, about how, maybe these things aren't actually divisive. For example, Jojo Rabbit, that's a movie that does not have great critical reviews. Of course, you got a Critics' Choice nomination, but that's another matter. But that one I don't consider divisive in the industry at all. And maybe Joker is in the same boat. Joker is picking up nominations here, even for costumes. And even for makeup. I thought that was just... Isn't that just the face paint that kind of every clown puts on?
Just clown makeup, yeah.
Yeah, the costumes.
One thing I'm interested to see is who will win adapted screenplay at this point, because I think it's kind of a 3-way race at the moment. I think The Irishman, Jojo Rabbit, and Little Women all have a strong possibility of winning there. I think you could see any one of them sort of feeling like this is the place where we reward this film, because to be honest, I don't really see The Irishman picking up any other wins at the moment, and so that would be a nice place to reward that. And Steven Zaillian's certainly sort of a legend in the community. And then Jojo Rabbit, it feels like Taika Waititi is such a celebrity writer, actor, director of his own, and that's such a writer-friendly sort of screenplay. And the same thing certainly with Little Women, and that's pretty much a clear, this is a clear adaptation of someone taking a previous text and sort of splicing different things together. And I think there actually might be a groundswell of support possibly for Greta Gerwig to pull through in the end. Maybe some of the backlash of there being all male nominees and director and just love for the film. So
yeah, I was just going to say that, because I think actually the best thing for Greta Gerwig's chances in screenplay is that she didn't get nominated for director.
Yeah,
I think that I'm going to be predicting her. So I think that's the best thing to happen. One thing we haven't talked about is the snubs that we've talked about some of the snubs that break my heart. I really feel bad for Taron Egerton. He was really right there. And then didn't get in. I mean, that's just really disappointing. Also, Adam Sandler has said that if he doesn't get nominated, he's going to go make terrible movies again. Okay, we'll be waiting.
Yep.
Yeah, the Taron Egerton snub is quite disappointing, especially after Rami Malek won last year. And he campaigned so hard for this. And then it's the same for Jennifer Lopez. It's very disappointing to see her. You know, she was very happy with all the recognition she was getting for this movie. And it's just an example of the Academy probably not having either watched this movie or not having taken to this type of performance, which I saw coming, you know, even after she got the Globe and Critics' Choice and SAG nominations. So that was definitely very disappointing. A bunch of people who campaigned and then didn't end up getting the nominations, and it just shows you can have that combination of SAG, BAFTA, Critics' Choice, Golden Globe, and still not get in here. At this point, it's just not surprising, and I feel like every these type of snubs. And I have to admit, it's still very strange that we're now at the end of all the nominations and Robert De Niro did not get nominated anywhere except for Critics' Choice, which, looking back, is just absolutely insane. It's hard to wrap my head around that.
All right, Luca, what pleased you about these nominations?
What pleased me? Well, there wasn't that much. I have to say there wasn't that much that pleased me. I think probably what pleased me the most was the Little Women support, because it really hasn't performed at all during the season, minus Critics' Choice. And I'm just glad that this condensed Oscar season at least didn't manifest here necessarily for that movie. I think it peaked at the right moment. The box office numbers are incredible, and I'm glad that it was able to get these 6 nominations. I'm very happy for that Ad Astra nomination in the sound category. That was a great choice, because I think Ad Astra is a really great movie, especially Below the Line. And I'm just happy it got that one nomination. And except for that, there are nominations here and there that I really like. I still love some of the score nominees. I love Joker's score. I love 1917's score. So there's definitely a lot to like about these nominations. I just feel like they are very, again, uninspired. So there's not that much that I specifically loved about them, I have to admit.
And Kevin, do you have any final thoughts?
Well, my final thought is that even though Parasite did not get acting nominations, I'm still super proud of the film for making it all the way here and getting 6 nominations, including for production design and film editing especially. That's huge for that film, and I really do think that we have to be watching out for Parasite to make history with. I just feel like it has a certain X factor to it that could make it feel like the surprise winner, sort of like a Moonlight sort of thing happening, where Once Upon a Time in Hollywood might get the Golden Globe and Critics' Choice and SAG. That's all well and good, but I do feel like Parasite is so not divisive in any way, really, that nobody's ever talking bad about Parasite. There's been some backlash about the stuff that's happened with, how they handled the Charles Manson stuff and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, for example. But I just feel like no one has a bad word to say about Parasite, and I think it just might pull this thing off. First time in 92 years for a non-English language film to win Best Picture.
Yeah, I'm kind of glad that the Critics' Choice were last night if they were going to be awarding Once Upon a Time in Hollywood over Parasite, because now the Oscar nominations have come out and we can forget about what happened then. I'm not sure why they scheduled them like that, because they really are going to be overrun in the news cycle. Tony, what are your final thoughts?
Something we haven't really talked about, and that is the return of several Oscar veterans. Anthony Hopkins' first nomination, I want to say, since maybe 98, since Amistad, I think.
Yep.
Tom Hanks, after unjustly being snubbed multiple times, gets back in. Pacino, I don't think's been nominated for another Oscar since he won. So I was really happy to see, the return of, Pesci, and that whole supporting actor category is a real kind of,
Legends.
It's amazing. It's amazing that that Brad Pitt is kind of the the neophyte in that club, and Jonathan Pryce. I think Pryce is extraordinary in The Two Popes. So, seeing some of these people get accolades that they've been long overdue for. It's Pryce's first Oscar nomination, even though he has 2 Oliviers and 2 Tony Awards. So those, I want to end on a happy note.
All right. Unfortunately, I just received a message from Rob, so we will leave on that note instead. He says, I think these nominations are generally really terrible.
Oh.
All right. So thanks very much for watching. Please subscribe
Thanks a lot,
to
Rob.
Gold Derby, and also make your predictions on goldderby.com, as the Prediction Center was up and running very quickly. Thank you, Chris.